conversation now.
Hello?
Hey, Money.
What's up?
What's up? You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So, how do you want to start this? Like,
Good question.
yeah.
So what do you? Maybe we can because I want to talk about like two different things. I want to talk about the podcast
Mm-hmm.
itself, and how it differs from other podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I want to talk about the Garrett Felber interview. I want to kind of discuss the things I already told you that I wanted to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, you can cut it,
Yeah,
tweak it, wherever you feel like it's got to go.
gotcha.
Also, I guess you're going to need to do, like, you could probably do it, kind of like an introduction to who Garrett is,
Yeah.
right? We're doing an interview, Garrett Felber, author of,
Mm-hmm.
what is it, those who...
He's probably got his bio and like he's probably got like GarrettFelber.com or something. All professors have their own websites.
Fancy. Alright, well, maybe you can, do something general, but I'm just basically going to talk about the podcast. Maybe if you want to add your 2 cents to it, too,
Mm-hmm.
that's fine.
That sounds good.
And then we can talk about, after that, we can talk about the other stuff.
All right.
Tell me whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready now. I'm just gonna leave the recording going, and whenever we hit our stride, we hit our stride. You know.
Fair enough. So I think within the mix, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the mix is a prisoner-generated podcast. So what that means, at least to me, is that usually in a lot of podcasts or documentaries or various types of media, the prisoner or a prisoner is positioned as the subject, right? It's something to be, or someone to be talked about, analyzed, commented on,
Mm-hmm.
whereas our podcast makes it so that not only is a prisoner the subject of discussion, but also the interviewer, right? Positioned as the commentator. And that is a big difference, I think, than a lot of other podcasts, but it's even more than that. It's even beyond that. Like, I know a few abolitionist podcasts, and, they... How do I put this? I know a few abolitionist podcasts that also intend to do, prisoner as interviewer, as, the person actually engaging with other people.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful, but these podcasts still determine, what the subject of the episode will be, when the episode will come out, what the edits are going to be, right? And all
This
the
is a call from
administrative...
Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Fayette.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
and all the administrative features of the podcast. And to me, that I know, one, it's really because, being in prison, there is a communication difficulty, right? There's a gap there. It makes it hard.
Yeah.
But it seems kind of hierarchical to me, right? It seems like there's a hierarchy there where it's always people on the outside who are positioned as the gatekeeper for prisoners' voices.
Yeah.
And, so we kind of wanted some of that power.
Yeah.
Right? We want power to start making those types of decisions of what episodes would actually be about, when they would come out, what the edits were going to be, and the likes of that.
To me, that's like a kind of impulse that these abolitionist podcasts would have, where it's like they recognize the obstacles and the logistical difficulties in putting something together that's done in collaboration with prisoners. So rather than maybe giving prisoners the agency to overcome those problems, they think, it's their position to just, handle those problems themselves, overcome those barriers themselves. Is that kind of like what you're trying to get at?
I mean, alright, that's true. That is what I'm trying to get at. But for me personally, it's kind of deeper than that, right? I've been in prison for a while.
Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Fayette.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
I've been in prison for about 7 years now, and I would say over the past year and a half, where I've been in this process of trying to reclaim my humanity.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, prison is a place that is designed to dehumanize the people that it contains. So in this process of me trying to reclaim my humanity, I now have started evaluating the relationships that I have with people, and the project dynamics that I'm being offered. And I look and I ask myself, right, would I agree to this relationship, or would I agree to this certain project dynamic if I was on the street? Meaning that just because I'm in prison, I don't think that should make me have to settle for anything less than what I would in the world, especially when it comes to abolition work, right? So that's what really led me to want to do this podcast. It's not that, I'm more than willing to contribute to other people's projects. I have no problem doing that at all. But I wanted to break out of this constant mold of prisoners being the object that outside supporters use for movement work, right? Like, it's always that prisoners are this piece that outside supporters move in order to, push the movement forward, where I wanted prisoners to actually be not just those pieces, right, but actually the ones doing the strategizing and moving and making those types of decisions, right, having the power to make those decisions.
Well, let me ask you, is it even possible to push the movement forward like that by using prisoners as the object, as a pawn?
I mean, I think to a certain extent, yeah. I'm going to be honest with you. To a certain extent, I think it is, in a reformist sense. I don't think that you could have abolition like that, because abolition is about, abolishing those hierarchies of power, right? And that's what we're talking about right now. Somebody using somebody else as a pawn or a rook or a piece. So in a reformist sense, yeah, right? Maybe even in an abolitionist sense to a certain extent. I don't know. I don't know if I really want to comment on this part for the podcast, right?
Gotcha.
On a personal, like me and you right here, right? Because, people can use specific cases, right, to garner international support, right? We know that. I'm still in debate, right, as to whether that's something that's worth doing, though. Take Free Mumia, for instance, right? His case has garnered international support and things like that, but has it really done anything to push abolition as a whole forward? I don't know. I can't say it has or it hasn't. So I'll just remain silent on that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're trying to get into controversial stuff. I'm not trying to stay away from controversy right here.
We're gonna sit on that idea. We're gonna wait until we're like, that's like year anniversary of the podcast type stuff. We gotta be deep. We gotta have people invested before we get into that.
I was about to say, before we start coming at all of these non-profit abolitionists, bro, we gotta get some standards.
Yeah.
Alright. But I just, even if you want to add something to that, I'm just trying to, show the difference. Like, I was telling you before, I think you had this recorded too before, like how San Quentin prisoners have a podcast.
Yeah.
Right? But their podcast goes through prison administration before it can be approved, right? There's abolitionist podcasts that use prisoners or interview prisoners without the approval of prison administration. But I don't know of podcasts that, where prisoners are actually making those administration decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that's like where we're trying to take it to, like that next level of, okay, now let's actually start making these decisions of what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
All right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that all makes sense.
Okay. Maybe you can make that sound real good.
Yeah. It already sounds good. I'm gonna just leave out the spiciest parts.
Okay. All right. Good. You're trying to pull me in. All right. So now let's talk about the Garrett Felber interview.
Yeah.
Right. So, reading Garrett Felber's work, I had noticed that when he is referring to the Nation of Islam in his work, a lot of times he will just say Muslims. And this is a conversation that I had with him prior to the interview, that to a lot of prisoners, Sunni Muslim prisoners, this would actually be something that's controversial, because inside of prison there is a distinct difference and separation between the Nation of Islam and Orthodox, aka Sunni Muslims, right? There's two completely different sets of services, two completely different sets of leadership structures, study groups, right? It's two distinct and separate groups. And Orthodox Muslims, Sunni Muslims, don't consider members of the Nation of Islam to be Muslim, right? And this is a point of contention inside of prison. Now, the reason that Sunni Muslims don't consider Nation of Islam members to be Muslim is based upon some of the fundamental beliefs that NOI members hold. So really, in order to be Muslim, right, an individual has to take what we call the Shahada, right, or Shahadatain. They have to say the testimony of faith. They have to say, La ilaha illallah, that none has the right to be worshipped in truth except Allah, wa Muhammadur Rasulullah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. So they have to bear witness to these two things, that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and with that comes that there's nothing like Allah, meaning Allah did not come in the form of a man. There's no creation like Allah. There's nothing like him, right? And then also you bear witness that Muhammad, meaning the Muhammad who lived over 1,400 years ago from Mecca, who is Muhammad ibn Abdullah, Muhammad the son of Abdullah, the seal of the prophets, right? So anyway, in order for an individual to become Muslim, he has to take this testimony of faith. And what the scholars, the Orthodox Muslim scholars, have said about the NOI is that they've never entered into Islam because they've never made this testification. Okay? They never actually said the Shahada. So that does cause a distinct difference.
You have 1 minute left.
Inside of prison. Now, one of the things that Garrett had mentioned was this is similar to an argument that the state made against the Nation of Islam in order to try to discredit them, in order to try to say that they were not a valid religious organization. I would say there is a distinction, though, between why Orthodox Sunni Muslims say it and why the state said it. So what the state was trying to do was that they knew that the Nation of Islam had politics that put them in opposition to the state and put them in opposition to state power. So what the state tried to do was kind of lead them to more passive flavors and sex of Islam.
Thank you for using Securus. Goodbye.
Hey.
Okay. So what the state tried to do was direct the Nation of Islam members to more passive sex and flavors of Islam, right? And one of those that they tried to direct the Nation of Islam members to was the Ahmadiyya. Now, the Ahmadiyya are another deviant sect of Islam. Actually, they are also a group that the Orthodox Sunni Muslims have declared to not be Muslim because they also believe in a prophet after the Prophet Muhammad. But more particularly, the Ahmadiyya are so dangerous because they actually came about as an aid to colonialism. In the Pakistan-India area, when the British were occupying the area, this particular set declared that there was no more jihad, meaning that it was not permissible to fight against these occupiers and remove them from the land because jihad had been abolished, and they were basically the puppets of the British. They have a very, very passive stance, almost Christian-like, in turning the other cheek. So this is what the state was like trying to direct the Nation of Islam towards. That's for instance, but that's not our beef. Meaning that's not Sunni Islam's beef or Sunni Islam's opposition to the Nation of Islam. It's not based upon power differentials. It's not based upon anything other than adherence to fundamental religious issues. That's really where the separation comes from. It's not based upon race. It's not based upon geographical location. It's not based upon class or anything like that. The reason that Sunni Muslims do not believe that the Nation of Islam members are Muslim is because that they have never entered into Islam by taking the Shahada and taking this testimony of faith and making those declarations. And it's really as simple as that, but it does have a lot of effect inside a prison.
Would you be able to speak to what that effect is, if any, or if you're able?
Essentially what that means is that, the Nation of Islam is just a completely separate group than the Muslims. Sometimes we can come in opposition, particularly
Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Fayette.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
when the prison itself tries to lump us in the same category. So it's occurred in the past where, certain prison administrators will try to say, well, no, y'all are both Muslims, so you have to do the same services and the same classes. And when that happens, that's like trying to do a religious service, one religious service for, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, right? It's just not possible. Either you have a Jewish service, a Christian service, or an Islamic service, and they are, again, just a completely separate group. So that's really how it occurs, and what comes with that is what would occur between any distinct and separate groups inside a prison. Sometimes there's allyship, and sometimes there's opposition.
That's interesting, the point that you just brought up, or the example that you just brought up, because immediately what my mind goes to is, in the same way that you had brought up how the British were using different sects of Islam to consolidate its colonial power. It makes me think that the prison is doing a similar sort of thing, where they're trying to foment, struggle and strife between groups of people.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. That's definitely a valid argument. Actually,
This is
that's
a call
something
from
that's
Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Fayette.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
that's constantly occurring inside of these places where the people in positions of power here will try to pit, the different groups against each other. It just happened just quite recently that now they're telling us here. They let us have a religious class, an Islamic studies class, where about half the jail can attend it, meaning that they split the jail into two halves. So if you're on one side of the jail and you're Muslim, then you can come to this Islamic studies class. But then what wound up happening was now they're saying that we can't pray. So we can come to this class and we can learn, but we're not allowed to pray together. And how this came about was because the NOIs, they don't have a minister. So when they all got together, they wanted to pray. And the chaplain here, he's a Christian chaplain, he said, no, y'all can't pray. And they said, well, I'm sure y'all are praying, the Christians, and I'm sure the Muslims are praying, right? So why can't we pray? And what wound up happening was now this Christian chaplain, and it's definitely, to cause some beef between us, but we're not going to let that happen, came to us and was like, no, y'all can't pray anymore. By the way, the NOIs, right? So there's always this tactic occurring, no doubt.
All right.
So I don't know. I just kind of wanted to clarify that because it's important. There were a few other things that we talked about in the interview that I wish I would have just wrote it down right after.
Yeah.
Because they were fresh on my mind. And I'm like, I want to say this. I want to say that. I can't remember now. But maybe you could just cut that little portion out.
Yeah.
About the distinction and put that in there because it is important.
Gotcha. I'll put that preceding the interview. I think what I'll do is it'll be we'll introduce